Hello, everyone. I'm Juan Williams, along with Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, Greg Gutfeld, and Katie Pavlik. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Joe Biden finally breaking his silence and denying that he ever sexually assaulted his former Senate aide, Tara Reade.
It is not true. I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened. And it didn't. It never happened. I'm not going to question her motive. I'm not going to get into that at all. I don't know why she's saying this. I don't know why after 27 years, all of a sudden this gets raised. I don't understand it. But I'm not going to go in and question her motive. I'm not going to attack her. She has a right to say whatever she wants to say. But I have a right to say, look at the facts. Check it out. Find out whether any of what she says is asserted or true.
Biden also under pressure to release Senate records his accuser says could show that she filed a complaint back in 1993. The former VP says he's confident a complaint doesn't exist in the National Archives or at the University of Delaware, where his Senate records are being held.
I am absolutely positive that no one that I'm aware of ever has been made aware of any complaint, a formal complaint made by or a complaint by Tara Reade against me at the time this allegedly happened 27 years ago. A record like this can only be one place. It would not be at the University of Delaware. My archives do not contain personal files. My archives contain document, and when I say personal, personnel files. They don't contain any personnel files.
And President Trump weighing in on the Biden allegation.
I would just say to Joe Biden, just go out and fight it. It's one of those things. But I'd say she's far more convincing than Blasey Ford or the other three that I believe have already recanted.
Dana, I just wanted to start with you and say, do you think that Joe Biden did a good job?
I think he probably did better than his team was thinking, but, they had 5 weeks to prepare. I think waiting for the media frenzy to get to such a high-fevered pitch that you even had, the New York Times shaming them into not actually taking it on and doing an interview. I thought Mika Brzezinski at MSNBC had tough questions for him. I don't think anybody can say that was a super easy interview for him. He opened himself up for some skepticism, though, on this point about the documents. The National Archives saying, no, actually, we don't have those. That would be in your personal papers at the University of Delaware. And it is a little surprising to me, again, knowing for 5 weeks that this was coming, that they haven't gone to the university, asked for the full investigation, and been able to either produce or not produce it. So I think that they're vulnerable on a couple of points. And then on the substance of it, of course, vulnerable on the whole points about the hypocrisy. Now, I understand that, politics and hypocrisy go hand in hand. And if you are accused of hypocrisy, of saying one thing about the candidate you support and then something else against an opponent of that candidate, then you can always rationalize that. You can bring it up. But, in this case, the Democrats have walked themselves into this corner. And Tara Reade is said to she should be allowed to come forward. She's allowed to do interviews. She would do all of these things. I don't know exactly what will happen next because they are calling for an investigation of some sort, but I believe that the next battle is going to be about these documents. And let me just say one other thing. Right now, the Democrats are all standing behind Joe Biden. And you haven't heard much from them in the last several weeks. A few of the vice presidential shortlist candidates have been saying that they support him. Nancy Pelosi said Joe Biden is Joe Biden. But if you start to see any high-profile Democrats start to walk away or to show a little bit of daylight between Joe Biden and them, I think that you will see a whole rash then. And at that point, we might be watching some really interesting history unfold as we're 26 weeks away from the presidential election.
Well, Jesse, when President Trump went through this kind of thing, he denied it. So now you have Joe Biden denying one allegation, not a pattern, but one. So do you take him at his word the way that you took President Trump at his word?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take the person at their word, but you also just have to find the facts. And they haven't really investigated this the way they did investigate Blasey Ford. I mean, to Dana's point, if I had 5 weeks to prepare for one interview, boom, home run. I'd give Joe maybe a stand-up double here. I thought his tone was good, Mika was strong, but I don't know if he convinced anybody either way. Voters are just going to have to never know the truth and just factor this into their decision in November. He left himself vulnerable for sure. When Mika asked if he remembered Reid, he dodged. And his obvious Kavanaugh standard about believe all women has evolved. It's now believe all women at first and then investigate them. Now, a lot of people would think investigate and then believe. I'm not really sure what he believes. I just think he knows he needs to say what he needs to say to get out of that question. The records thing really opens up a can of worms. First, if you're going to say there's Senate records of sexual harassment complaints that the public hasn't seen, I mean, we already know they've settled massive amounts of lawsuits and done tons of payouts.
Yeah.
Like, what makes you think we're just going to look at Joe's records? Why not the current senators? I mean, how far back can you go? And then the Delaware thing, we already know his operatives snuck in there and were squirreling away records. They got caught by Business Insider. It's like, remember Sandy Berger? They called him Sandy Burglar, was stuffing documents in his pants after the Clintons missed Al-Qaeda. I could see that happening. But why did Joe Biden say that in his personal records, there are transcripts of conversations he had with Vladimir Putin? Why would he say that? You don't think the president's going to turn up the heat on that and say, Joe, release the transcript. I released my transcript. Mine was perfect. What about yours? So this isn't going away anytime soon.
All right. Hey, Greg, take a listen. Here's Joe Biden talking about Justice Kavanaugh.
If they come forward and say something that they said happened to them, they should start off with the presumption they're telling the truth. Then you have to look at the circumstances and the facts. And the facts in this case do not exist. They never happened. And there's so many inconsistencies in what has been said in this case. What I said during the Kavanaugh hearings was that she had a right to be heard. And the fact that she came forward, the presumption would be she's telling the truth unless it's proved she wasn't telling the truth.
So, Greg, does this give the Democrats cover, holding to that standard that people now have heard from Tara Reid? People have vetted Tara Reid, and now Joe Biden has spoken on Tara Reid.
Yeah, and I'm going to take Biden at his word. I presume that she's telling the truth, because that's exactly what he said. They haven't disproven it. They haven't disproven it. So we have to presume she's telling the truth. Look, Biden was doing great in that interview until he confessed. You know, first he had the total denial. I thought that was pretty good. The denial was pretty strong. And then he says, as a complaint, you know, I don't know why all of a sudden, 27 years, this gets raised. What is this? What is this? That's interesting. I would pursue that. They also didn't bring up a lot of the corroborating, very tough word to say, corroborating evidence. Like, what about the phone call into Larry King? I thought that was interesting. That was interesting. That was around the 90s. I think what's fun is watching the pro-Biden response, which is almost word for word what their side would have mocked when presented in defense of Kavanaugh. So they're apoplectic over a single segment interview of their candidate. The Kavanaugh thing, why you can't compare it, went for days. He was grilled by teams of salivating lawyers. And Mika ruffles their feathers with one segment. Shut up, you're a bunch of hypocrites. Again, the argument will always be about consistency. Everybody's brought it up. But if you said believe all women, then you got to destroy Joe Biden. So theoretically, Joe Biden has to take Joe Biden out unless he says, hey, this whole believe all women thing, it only suits us politically. So I'm actually not a sexual harasser. I'm just a shameless hypocrite that will ruin you politically given the opportunity. Lastly, I've noticed an epidemic of people getting hoisted by their own petard. Petard's a box that holds a bomb.
Love that.
Number one, de Blasio gets busted for violating rules that he enforced and wanted people to narc on others. Number two, you saw the dudes that tried to frame Michael Flynn framing themselves. And now you got a guy who was right up there, Me Too and Kavanaugh, getting Me Too'd himself by himself. So I find this epidemic to be extremely interesting. Look, Spider doing push-ups.
All right.
Is that fun?
Yeah.
It's Friday.
Right.
It's Friday.
Katie
Have fun,
Pavlik.
everybody. Come on.
Katie, the vice president has said that a woman will be his vice presidential choice. He's named a panel this week.
Yeah.
So what happened today, the denial, the whole episode, is that going to impact who the choice is? I think, right now you've got Senator Harris, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warren, and former House Rep Stacey Abrams from Georgia.
Well, first, I think the news that came out of this interview today is not that he denied it, because that was obvious. What is he supposed to say? Yeah, I did it. Let's move on. Of course that he was going to do that. The news is that he was finally asked about it, and the president had been asked about it multiple times before Joe Biden was asked about it. So that's the first thing, and I would hope that the media doesn't just let it go, because there has been one interview about his response to it. But to your question about the vice presidential candidate, a lot of these women who are on the short list, apparently, for this position were worse than Joe Biden when it came to what they said about Brett Kavanaugh and due process. And I thought that the Trump campaign today, what they said in their statement about the Vice President Joe Biden's record on this issue, especially when it comes to college campuses of young men all over the country, and the standard that the Obama administration applied to sexual accusations on campus, Joe Biden would have been expelled and order be lifted. President Trump tweeting the governor should make a deal with the protesters. So, Greg, as this thing drags on, some governors are taking these restrictions off, some are putting more on. Your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to quote my favorite philosopher, Hannah Frankson, who said, "You didn't come this far to come this far." So it's like we're carrying this really expensive wedding cake to the ballroom, and you make it already there, almost there, and then you drop it. You don't want to drop it. We've been flattening this curve. This country is made of heroes who've been able to fight a deadly disease, and you don't want to screw the whole thing up. I think we do need an office of reasonableness, like some guy like Norm from Cheers, who listens to the complaints and says, okay, you both got a point. Maybe, Governor, not so much overreach. And protesters, wear your masks and self-distance, but maybe don't bring guns to the Capitol, because that makes everybody really nervous. That's kind of like the reasonableness we need, and I think that's Trump's role. He's like the street-level reasonable guy who should kind of like step in and go, okay, kids, we're almost there. Let's not screw it up. We don't need a showdown.
Don't make me turn this car around. Please don't. Dana, there is a legal aspect to this, and Attorney General Bill Barr has been, for a couple of weeks, telling states, yeah, we're taking a look at whether you're overreaching or not. And it seems like they're getting to that point in certain places.
And I understand, and I think Bill Barr actually has said something even additional just in the last few minutes here, saying that it's time for some of these restrictions to be lifted. Now, the federal government is also putting a lot of the onus, and rightly so, on the states and the governors to make decisions. And so I think it's a little bit of a sticky wicket for the federal government then to say, okay, well, it's time for this governor or that governor. You've gone too far. You've gone too far. The governors are either in charge or they're not. And she will have to, Governor Whitmer will have to deal with the fallout of her decisions. And I do think also that the imagery makes a difference here. If you have, you're always going to see the pictures that grab the most attention will be the ones where there maybe were just a few people, but they are people doing things that you think, wow, okay, is that necessary? Like, whoa, back off. And in some ways, it makes the governor look more sympathetic. But I do feel like across the board, if you look at somebody like Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, he's trying to make some good decisions. They're reopening in a lot of places, but they're continuing to keep the ski areas closed. And I think if you're going to make sure that the governors are in charge and you want to blame them for things that go wrong, you also have to give them some leeway.
Yeah, Juan, what about that? Giving the governors some leeway and letting them make their own decisions. But there are political implications going on inside of the states. Governor Whitmer now is in a fight with Republicans who are saying that they're going to sue over her new restrictions that she has extended.
Well, I like Norm from Cheers. I like reasonableness. I'm all for that. I think we do need reasonable people around here because, you know, to me, it's pretty clear if you look at the public opinion on this, 80%, I don't care which poll you pick, AP, Reuters, Kaiser Health, most Americans say they're fine with shelter in place. I think it's like more than half of Republicans and Democrats say another month doesn't bother them, even people who are unemployed at the moment as a result. But you know what? I think that people who have a different point of view have an important message to deliver and deserve to be heard. I don't like the guns and the intimidation. I don't like that at all. But I think that they deserve to be heard, and as long as the governors are trying to explain to the citizens what they're doing, that they're operating in terms of the science, I think we've got to give the governors leeway to make those calls. I think that, you know, if they're being unreasonable, let's have a discussion. Yeah. Let's challenge it. But that's not what we're hearing from most Americans at this juncture. We have a vocal minority deserving to be heard, but they can't dictate public policy on that basis.
Jesse, is it time for another plea to save the football season?
I mean, football. How about baseball? Let's go. I just don't see Gretchen as Norm. I don't see her looking into the face of a bunch of guys with guns storming the Capitol and saying, you know what, we're going to lock ourselves in this room and not come out until we solve the lockdown. She just doesn't have what it takes. I do understand her concern. Michigan's top 3 in deaths, top 7 in cases, but she has to read the room. This is an agricultural, industrial, automobile economy. They're people that are working with their hands. This is a blue-collar state. They need to get out and work. It's not like New York where they can go to a second home or work from home on the computer. Good governors know their state. She doesn't know hers.
All right. Well, we've been debating about reopening the economy. If you're a business owner or employee who wants to ask the president a question, send us a video at townhall@foxnews.com or log on to the Fox News Facebook or Instagram pages to share.
Communist country in retaliation. Trump also saying he's seen evidence suggesting COVID-19 came from a lab in Wuhan. Watch.
We're looking at exactly where it came from, who it came from, how it happened, separately and also scientifically.
Have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves because they're like the public relations agency for China.
All right, Greg, so in terms of making China pay a price, I don't know if more tariffs are the right idea when you're coming out of this terrible economy. What would you do?
That was my line. The WHO is his press agency. Remember that? I like to call every line that he uses. All right. But, you know, it's a compliment to me. I'm very touched. Look, this is always, if you've been conscious for 4 years, you're aware that Trump's strategy rarely produces the goal that the media expects. So his strategy is publicly, I am the bad cop. Privately, I'm the good cop. So he's blunt with China, and he's rightly so should be blunt and angry with them. But then he'll be favorable to President Xi, who I know I just ruined his name. So the goal ends up not being war or peace. It's a situation that is, you know, gives our country the advantage. So he's working on behalf of the United States, but it's his role. That's why I don't understand how people get all, you know, you can look at the stock market. The stock market is like your nervous aunt. She's just having a nervous breakdown every 10 minutes. It's like, we get it. This is how Trump works.
Dana, it looks like the president is being successful so far with rallying the rest of the world kind of against China. What kind of momentum do you see there?
Well, first of all, Greg, I got to point out that if the president ever takes one of your lines, you just got to give it to him free of charge. Like, no, hey, you don't try to take credit. You got to give it to him.
I do the same with Scott Adams.
That's true. Oh, drink. I don't even have my water with me here. So I thought that the president was actually trying to make a little bit of news yesterday on China, and it was almost like if you were Hansel and Gretel, he's dropping crumbs along the way. Because he is the commander-in-chief, he has to figure out a way to deal with this country, because something that China is doing while we're all busy dealing with coronavirus, they are pushing forward in the South China Sea. Who knows what they're doing to the Uyghurs? The human rights situation in China is deteriorating. Think about what China has done to the continent of Africa, and now basically having taken all of these minerals and put all of these countries in debt, now are calling for those debts to be paid by these African countries that have been treated terribly by China. I think that you have a split in the Europeans. Are not exactly sure how to deal with China, because in a lot of ways they think they need China's help. We also have a situation where China actually might be the first country that comes up with a vaccine. Are we going to want access to that vaccine? Now, we know that when remdesivir, made by Gilead, when it was sent over as a possible treatment, the Chinese, what did they do? Immediately tried to copy it.
Yep.
And not give us any credit for it. So we've got big problems with China. I think instead of the tariffs, like tariffs are paid by people, so I wouldn't do that. But you look at something like Japan has basically said to all of its companies, we want you to come back and manufacture in our country, leave China, we will help you do that. That would be a big undertaking for American companies, but I think the president could possibly do something like that, and I would call that before Joe Biden does.
Yeah, I fully support that. Maybe in the second term, maybe right now, you don't go that far as the economy recovers. Katie Pavlich, you know, the timing of China trying to patent that drug, very suspicious. It was like within the same week as the WHO said this thing wasn't contagious, yet they're trying to patent the drug.
Yeah. Yeah, the timing on all of the things that China is saying, you can just erase all of what they've been telling you because it's not true. In terms of what we can do here in the United States, China is engaged in espionage against the United States on every single level. I know Tom Cotton is working to make sure that we now at least put a hold on student visas for Chinese students who want to come to the United States and study STEM and be in our labs and our PhD programs and steal all of that information and take it back to China so they can copy drugs and they can compete with us when it comes to vaccines. So domestically, there's a lot we can do. In Europe, you now have the UK finally coming to their senses and dropping Huawei as a 5G provider. Hopefully the rest of Europe will not be cowardly in doing the same, and they will realize that the West has their interest in mind and not China, and take lessons from Africa and the way that China has come in to help them. And really, it's about controlling them and taking away their resources. So there, as Dana said, there are huge problems with China, and they're going to take a whole of government approach in addressing them. And hopefully politics won't get in the way of that.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Little Hansel and Gretel reference from Dana's earlier point with regard to Huawei in China and the UK. Juan Williams, how do you separate the Chinese Communist Party from the Chinese people? Because that's the problem. We don't have any problems with the people. It's the authoritarian regime.
That's very good, Jesse. I appreciate your making that point, because I think that we need to, as this becomes so political, make it
Juan, we're going to now go to the president because he took a few
questions
earlier on the way to Air Force One. Let's listen to that.
The Lincoln Memorial, that'll be very nice. But we'll be back soon, and I think some of you will be traveling out around the area where I'm going. But we'll be at Camp David for a working weekend.
North Korean leader just surfaced at a fertilizer plant in North Korea. Do you know about this? Anything you can tell us?
Yeah, I'd rather not comment on it yet. Kim Jong-un will have something to say about it at the appropriate time.
Would you advise him to support social distancing?
I think he's doing a very good job. He's a great friend of mine. And the president is doing really well in Brazil. We're very proud of him.
How about the situation with the coronavirus in Brazil?
Well, they've been hit hard. Brazil's been hit very hard. But you have a president that's doing a very good job.
Mr. President, do you know that Kim is alive? Can you at least say that?
I don't want to talk about it.
Mr. President, I want to be talking to him.
I may.
talked about potential tariffs on China yesterday. Is that something that's under serious consideration?
So we're going to see what happens. A lot of things are happening with respect to China. We're not happy, obviously, with what happened. This is a bad situation all over the world, 182 countries. But we'll be having a lot to say about that. It's certainly an option. It's certainly an option, Joe.
Mr. President, are you going to be social distancing?
Certainly an option.
Are you going to be social distancing during your work weekend?
Yeah, I will.
You were not happy with Governor Kemp about opening up in Georgia.
I didn't say that, Jeff. I said I didn't like the particular place, a spa, a tattoo parlor. No. I think it's wonderful. I want to see us open safely. But I didn't like spas and tattoo parlors, and I wasn't thrilled about that. But I said nothing about Georgia other than that. I like the states opening.
You, in this previous block, when you quoted classic children literature, you said that Fee Fi Fo Fum is from Hansel and Gretel, a reference to something I said. It's actually
wait,
from Jack and the Beanstalk.
It's not. Jack and the Beanstalk. You know.
There you go. There you go.
I stand
All right,
corrected.
parents in Georgia say they're getting nervous because teens can now get their driver's licenses without taking a road test due to the coronavirus. Now, Greg, you know a lot about driving tests. You went through this not too long ago. What do you think of this?
Well, Jack and the Beanstalk, Hansel and Gretel, this truly is the Algonquin table, not the 5. Teenagers are the perfect group for road tests. I don't know if you've been outside lately, because I come in every day. It's the Autobahn out there. Because there are fewer cars, a dramatic decline in traffic, there's an uptick in fatalities caused by relentless speeding. And the calling card of the underdeveloped brain of a young driver who has nothing to lose because they can't tabulate loss at all, they have to take a driver's test. This is idiotic. Sorry.
Juan, how would you feel if you were a parent and all of a sudden your teenage kids didn't have to have a driver's test?
I'd feel unsafe. I don't think it's too rational, but at the same time, due to the virus, what choice do you have? Because if you're 16, you're dying to get your driver's license. That's just reality. But I do have a question, Dana. Where are they going? Right now, there's less traffic because there's nowhere to go. So what's the rush if you can just say, hey, slow down on the hormones? You know, you don't need the license right now.
You don't. Katie, how about you?
They're leaving their parents' house.
Driving test with flying colors.
It's like the concept of having your driver's license when you turn 16. You don't want to wait until you're 17 to do this. But I think Greg should ask for a refund since he had to go through all of the testing. And I do think that parents are actually responsible for making sure their kids know how to drive before they go to the DMV to get their driver's license. So, you know, that preparation, I think, can happen. You can still be a safe driver without having the exact test at the DMV. But it's a good, prudent thing to have, I think.
Jesse, I'm looking into the future, and I'm seeing you teaching your young daughters to drive. That'll be something.
Yeah, that will be something, won't it? I can just imagine. In Georgia, you have teenage adrenaline junkies, probably hopped up on some crazy drug I've never heard of, and then you have COVID-19. I'm taking my chances with COVID.
Outside all the time?
Yeah, it was a great job.
Getting tips?
Yeah, outside. Well, I got in fights with waiters because I wasn't old enough to be a waiter, so I had to be a hostess, and they wouldn't always share their tips, even though I would bust their tables, so they weren't spreading the wealth around.
I can predict Dana's answer. Dana, what is one job you wouldn't mind doing again?
Country music DJ, but with better hours, because I worked overnights, and I would not want to work overnights again, but I'd do that job again.
You do it already. You do it right now on the 5. This next song is from so-and-so, written by a good friend of mine, coming up.
So
Jesse?
Look, I have friends.
I just can't believe Dana fact-checked my fairy tale like that.
I know. Well,
I mean, I get one thing wrong my entire career. It's a fairy tale. I mean, I was a busboy for like a week before I got fired, so I'd probably be a busboy just so I could be in a restaurant again.
Yeah. Eat off other people's plates. What about you, Juan?
The fries.
My first job was as a gardener, the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. So I can imagine that. That's a lot of fun. And then at one point in school, I was a short order cook in the cafeteria, and I had a lot of fun. Got some burns, but I had a lot of fun doing that. That's an intense job, by the way.
Yeah. I was, my favorite job, aside from this, was being called a pool monitor at a Foster City, California condo on Edgewater Drive. And I remember the first question the guy asked me was, do you have a life-saving certificate? And I said, no. And he says, good, you won't need it. And he says, we do not want you to save anybody because we don't have insurance. So just sit in the chair and hand the stick. Use the stick if anybody's drowning. Luckily, that never happened. Foster City, California. Next question from Frenchie Firecracker. Blast from the past. Real quick, if you could have unlimited access to one thing besides money, what would it be? Huh. Well, that's greedy. Dana, what would it be? Can't say money.
Right now, at the end of this week, red wine.
Yes. Juan, unlimited access to what?
Your love, Gregory.
Damn it. I was going to say the same thing. Jesse?
That's what I thought. I beat you to it. I beat you to it.
Well, there's one answer I'm not allowed to say, so I'm going to go with, if it's not money, I can't say money. Are you sure I can't say money?
Yeah.
Wishes? Do I get wishes?
Yeah, you get wishes.
3 wishes.
Unlimited wishes. Katie?
Right.
I would say land or airplane rides.
Ooh, that's good. That's very practical.
Ooh.
Because if you have
like
the land,
Yeah.
you're going to need the airplanes. I'm kind of like Jesse. What I want.